really wanted to focus on American manufacturers. So about 95% of our supplier pool is domestic, or so we thought.
Detroit, the heart of America's auto industry, is facing its worst crisis in decades. Former President Donald Trump's aggressive tariff policies have just slammed into 7 major automakers, triggering mass layoffs across Michigan's once thriving factories. Thousands of workers are losing jobs as production lines grind to a halt, suppliers shut down, and car prices threaten to skyrocket nationwide. But while Detroit bleeds, Canada is celebrating unexpected gains as manufacturers shift investments north of the border to escape U.S. trade barriers. The city that once built America's automotive empire now stands at a crossroads, with its future hanging by a thread as the fallout from Trump's trade war spreads across borders and industries. In a stunning blow to the American auto industry, 7 major automakers, including household names like Ford, GM, and Stellantis, have announced sweeping layoffs across Detroit and other U.S. manufacturing hubs. The cause, former President Donald Trump's latest round of tariffs on imported auto parts and steel, measures he claimed would bring jobs back to America. Instead, the policy has backfired spectacularly, sending shockwaves through an industry already struggling with high costs, tight supply chains, and fierce global competition. Company executives revealed that the tariffs, which increased costs on critical components by as much as 30%, left them with no choice but to cut production and reduce workforce numbers. Ford alone confirmed thousands of job losses, while GM announced temporary plant shutdowns in Michigan and Ohio. Union leaders have described the situation as a nightmare for American workers, accusing policymakers of failing to protect jobs while destabilizing the entire industry. Meanwhile, Canada is emerging as the unexpected winner. Automakers are quietly shifting investments north of the border, where production costs remain stable and trade barriers are far lower. Ontario officials report a surge in new auto contracts as companies flee U.S. tariffs, bringing billions in new investments and thousands of jobs to Canadian manufacturing towns. Wall Street reacted sharply, with auto stocks plunging amid fears of a prolonged industry downturn. Analysts warn that the layoffs could ripple across suppliers, dealerships, and related businesses, hitting local economies already weakened by inflation and high interest rates. For Detroit, once the proud symbol of American industrial power, the mass layoffs mark yet another chapter in its long economic decline. And with Canada gaining ground, the question now is whether the U.S. auto industry can survive this self-inflicted crisis. Trump's tariff war didn't begin overnight. During his presidency, he repeatedly vowed to revive American manufacturing, claiming decades of trade deals had hollowed out U.S. industry and shipped jobs overseas. The auto sector became one of his biggest targets. Starting in 2018, his administration imposed tariffs on imported steel and aluminum, arguing it was necessary for national security. Soon after, threats of tariffs on European cars, Asian auto parts, and even Canadian metals followed, creating waves of uncertainty across global supply chains. Initially, the idea was to pressure automakers to build more vehicles in the United States, hire American workers, and reduce the U.S. trade deficit. Trump promised these measures would spark a manufacturing renaissance in cities like Detroit, long seen as symbols of American industrial strength. But the reality turned out far messier. Automakers depend on intricate international supply chains, sourcing everything from electronic components in Asia to specialty metals in Europe and Canada. Tariffs on imported materials drove up costs for U.S. manufacturers, while retaliatory tariffs from other countries reduced American car exports abroad. Instead of boosting domestic production, the policies left automakers squeezed between higher expenses at home and falling demand overseas. Today's mass layoffs and plant closures trace directly back to those escalating trade tensions, with Canada now reaping the benefits as companies look for friendlier business environments beyond U.S. borders. The economic impact of Trump's tariffs on the U.S. auto industry is hitting hard and fast. Detroit, once the proud heart of American manufacturing, is now seeing thousands of layoffs ripple through factories, suppliers, and dealerships. Each job loss affects not just workers, but also local businesses, restaurants, stores, and service providers, already struggling with inflation and high interest rates. Economists warn the ripple effect could cost tens of thousands of additional jobs nationwide as auto production slows and consumer prices rise. Politically, the fallout is explosive. Critics accuse Trump's policies of backfiring, pointing to Canada's sudden boom as proof. Ontario has become a major beneficiary, with automakers redirecting billions in investments north of the border to avoid U.S. tariffs. Canadian officials are welcoming new factories, jobs, and economic growth as American states like Michigan and Ohio bleed manufacturing talent and capital. Union leaders, once hopeful about Trump's promises to bring back jobs, now express frustration, saying workers are paying the price for political decisions made without understanding global supply chains. Meanwhile, Trump allies insist the tariffs are necessary for long-term economic independence, arguing short-term pain will lead to future gains, though evidence for that claim is increasingly thin. For Detroit and the American Midwest, the political blame game offers little comfort as livelihoods vanish. The international auto industry is watching the U.S. crisis with growing concern and, in some cases, quiet relief. European automakers like Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz, already hit by U.S. tariffs on vehicles and parts, have begun scaling back expansion plans in America, choosing instead to focus on markets with fewer trade barriers. Japanese giants like Toyota and Honda, long considered staples of U.S. manufacturing, are warning that continued instability could force them to reconsider future investments in the Midwest. Meanwhile, South Korea's Hyundai and Kia, already frustrated by rising costs in the U.S., are accelerating plans to shift production to Canada, Mexico, and Southeast Asia, where governments are offering tax incentives and trade stability. China, seeing an opportunity, is pushing aggressively into the electric vehicle market, hoping to fill gaps left by retreating Western automakers. Canada, for its part, is welcoming the influx of jobs and capital. Ontario officials have announced new partnerships with automakers fleeing U.S. tariffs, promising streamlined regulations and subsidies to attract even more investments. Global financial markets are also reacting sharply. Auto stocks in the U.S. have plummeted, while Canadian equities tied to manufacturing and energy are surging. Analysts warn that if U.S. trade policies remain unpredictable, America risks losing its decades-long dominance in auto manufacturing to competitors in Asia, Europe, and even its own neighbors. The future of the U.S. auto industry now hangs in the balance. With 7 automakers announcing layoffs, Canada gaining production contracts, and global competitors circling, analysts warn this could mark the start of a long-term shift away from America as a manufacturing hub. Unless trade policies change quickly, companies may continue moving operations to friendlier markets with lower tariffs, predictable regulations, and access to global supply chains. Electric vehicles, EVs, add another layer of complexity. The U.S. was once expected to lead the EV revolution, but tariff-driven instability risks slowing domestic EV production just as Europe and China accelerate ahead. Canada, offering subsidies and free trade access to key materials like lithium and nickel, could soon dominate North American EV manufacturing if current trends continue. Politically, pressure is mounting for Washington to rethink its trade approach. Lawmakers from both parties are calling for targeted tariffs instead of blanket measures that hit allies and domestic workers alike. Union leaders demand immediate relief for laid-off workers, while governors in the Midwest lobby for federal incentives to keep auto plants at home. If no policy adjustments come, economists warn the next decade could see America lose its competitive edge in an industry it once created. Detroit, once the beating heart of global automotive power, risks becoming a shadow of its former self as capital, jobs, and innovation shift elsewhere. Detroit's crisis is no longer a warning, it's reality. 7 automakers hit, thousands of jobs gone, and Canada walking away with the gains. What was supposed to protect American workers has instead triggered mass layoffs, surging costs, and a historic shift in auto manufacturing power. The future of the U.S. auto industry now depends on whether leaders can undo the damage before more companies leave and more workers lose their livelihoods. As the world watches Detroit's decline and Canada's rise, one thing is clear: trade wars carry consequences far beyond politics. For more breaking updates on global markets, politics, and the economy, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.